ROTC commissions 70% of all the officers of the United States. Could you imagine if, by this experiment at Norwich University, the birthplace of ROTC, if we provide a very important tool in these young officers' toolbox that they've never had the benefit of before, we can influence 70% of the officer corps in a very short period of time. And we owe it to them to give them the best tools to win. And I think this is one of these tools.
Dr. Richard Schneider is the 23rd president of Norwich University. He is a 1968 graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. He was regimental commander of the Corps of Cadets, sailing master on the bark Eagle. He was commissioned as an ensign in the Coast Guard and served 8 years of active duty, including a tour in Vietnam. He served 30 years of both active and reserve duty, retiring in 1998 as a Rear Admiral. Dr. Schneider's military awards include the Coast Guard Distinguished Service Medal, Coast Guard Meritorious Service Medal, Coast Guard Commendation Medal with Gold Star, Navy Commendation Medal, and numerous campaign decorations for service in Vietnam. He earned a master's degree in liberal studies from Wesleyan and a doctorate in public policy from the University of Delaware. Dr. Schneider is, amidst all of this, married to Jamie Gilroy and has 4 married daughters. Dr. Schneider, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and it's an honor to meet Candy. I feel like I know her. You've been in my living room for a long time, so I'm going to call you Candy if that's okay. It's great. Great to see you. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm going to tell you a short story of this walk with TM. In the fall of '09, I got an incredible call from a wonderful friend of Norwich, whose father actually was a trustee for years, one of our most distinguished trustees, Joan Andrews, and it was her dad. And in fact, there was a beautiful gym named after him. And she said, I need you to look at something. I said, okay, what? She said, I'm going to send you some stuff about the DavidLynch Foundation, and particularly about what they're doing in post-traumatic stress disorder and how they're helping our veterans, and what they're doing in high schools for high-risk students. And I said, TM. And I remembered the Beatles. I'm a '68 guy. And I said, oh, Joan, really? I said, let me study this a little bit. So I did, and we did, and we invited the wonderful people from the DavidLynch Foundation up. Dr. Reese came up, and Joan came with them, and Bobby came with them, Bobby Roth, who was my teacher. And I was really impressed with the science of it. I'm a data's guy. I want to see the data. And I said, this is worth trying. It's worth the risk. The political risk of being a college president and doing something that many of the faculty may have said was whacked, or with the connotations of that. And so what I did is, you always lead from the front, Candy. You don't make your troops do something that you won't do. So I said, okay, I'm willing to get trained, and who wants to join me? So we had 15 people volunteer, faculty members and staff, and we had our first time of training with the wonderful teachers from the DavidLynch Foundation. And we were very impressed as a group. I honestly do think I'm a better president. At least I'm a less stressful president. I may not be a better one, but I'm less stressed personally. And that was great. So we then approached the senior leadership of the regiment and said, listen, we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 months, very quietly, by the way. We didn't tell anybody about it because I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. So I didn't want to get everybody excited about this, so we were kind of like just doing this very quietly. And we had about 300 students in the beautiful Plumley Armory. And we got a bunch of volunteers, and we trained 37 of them. And they gave us a thumbs up on it also. We need to do this. So that summer we wrote to the entire inbound Rook class. Rooks are recruits. That's the Norwich shorthand. For those of you that want to come to Norwich again, please, or come. You can send your young people to us. We'd love to have them. But we wrote to them, and over 60 parents said, I'd love my student to be able to experience this training. And by the way, it's all volunteers. So we set up 2 platoons, one that had been trained right away as soon as they arrived at school, and then a control group. Within a couple weeks, the control group was angry with us. We want that training now, because they were hearing stories from their classmates about how much better they were doing in school. And for me, it's all about improving performance, academically, athletically, discipline-wise, in every way at school as a whole person. So actually that group did finally get trained this spring. And we were so impressed with the results that we're doing it again. Of course, as steady as you go, we're going to do this again for 60 students. In fact, some of the freshmen that were trained will become sophomore cadre members overseeing the new ones coming in because they understand what to expect. So we couldn't be more thankful for the wonderful support we've gotten from the DavidLynch Foundation or the great financial support we got from the Education Foundation of America, which is one of Joan Andrews' foundations. And what's happening for our students, it's a very simple idea, gang. If we can get them to have this tool before they go into battle, they'll be able to handle their own personal stress better, which means their troops will appreciate that from their leaders better. And then when they can come back home, perhaps they will be more resilient as well. So we're looking forward to tracking these students through their entire career and see if that can happen. That is our goal, to make them stronger, really smart, really strong, really brave, and emotionally prepared for the traumas of war. It's my pleasure to introduce one of our researchers, Carol Bandy, just promoted on Sunday by the Board of Trustee action to professor, the highest rank one could achieve in the military or in the academic world, and she's just a great scientist. And why don't you welcome Dr. Carol Bandy.
My colleagues and I have been studying the neurophysiology of the threat response and post-traumatic stress in veterans and cadets for the last 5 years. So when the university contacted me regarding evaluating the effectiveness of the new TM training program for Rooks, I immediately recognized the opportunity for a longitudinal study, comparing the TM-trained cadets to those we had already tested. We hypothesized that TM training would not only reduce stress, but that it would also build resilience and psychological hardiness, and that this would happen over time gradually. And ultimately, psychological hardiness and resilience would help to either prevent a severe response to eventual combat trauma or to allow them to recover from it more rapidly. In the process, of course, we could evaluate the effectiveness of the TM training in the short term as well. So these were and are our research questions. Great, this works. So for the present study, we had 60 freshman volunteers, Rooks, who were randomly assigned to one of two conditions. First group was immediately trained in the TM technique. This was the experimental group. Or they were assigned to be in the control group, the poor control group, which had to wait 6 months. But they were invaluable for the study. It's because of them that we now have confidence in the findings that I'm going to be presenting to you. Okay, so prior to training, baseline measures were obtained for both groups, including a battery of questionnaires covering stress, trauma, resilience, cognitive and affective states. In addition, neurophysiological measures, including pupillometry, EEG, and behavioral tasks related to cognition and attention. All of these were administered. Okay. The TM training group meditated twice daily as a group for 20 minutes, and the control group received no stress reduction techniques of any kind. Both groups were trained in the normal way. The battery of questionnaires was re-administered to both groups after 9 weeks of TM practice, and all neurophysiological measures were re-administered after 6 months of TM practice. As a matter of fact, we've just recently finished collecting the EEG data. And importantly, all data analysis was blind to condition. Okay, today I'm going to be telling you about the preliminary findings based on 2 months of TM practice. To sum up the findings, we found that anxiety, depression, stress, and mood disturbance all decreased. And we also found that constructive thought, positive coping, and resilience all increased. And as a matter of fact, these increased very strongly. We'll get to that in a moment. First, we start with state anxiety. We found that for the control group, state anxiety remained the same, but state anxiety decreased significantly for the TM group. We used the Beck Depression Inventory, which is the gold standard for measuring depression. And again, we found that the control group stayed virtually the same from pre to post, but we found an enormous decrease for the TM trained group. Perceived stress also declined for the TM group, but not for the control group. It was pretty clear by the time we got to this point that the two groups were in fact comparable, that random assignment had done its job of eliminating and washing out individual differences between the two groups. Okay, one more negative aspect of affect that went down was mood disturbance, and this is really bad moods, essentially, is what this is measuring. And they decrease for the TM group, but not for the control group. Okay, so far we've seen various forms of negative affect have decreased significantly and across the board for the TM group, but not for the control group. It's always good to have less of negative feeling states, but what about improvement? First, we see that the scores on the dispositional resilience scale indicate a very large increase in resilience for the TM group. Now, the dispositional resilience scale is the gold standard for measuring psychological hardiness. It's thought to be the best overall measure of resilience, and resilience is a broad construct. It was expected this was going to take at least a year of TM practice, but we found a significant increase in only 2 months. Keep in mind that this came during the most intense part of the Rook training. Both groups, the TM group, the experimental group, and the control group, started with resilience at the same level as that of the national norm for American cadets and also for Scandinavian cadets. These norms are reported by Paul Bartone, who developed the short version of the dispositional resilience scale that we used. But what we see is that the TM group just blew past the norms for all American cadets and Scandinavian cadets in 2 months. And this was an extremely large statistical effect, so we have great confidence in it. This scale is known to predict success in Army Special Ops. Okay. The constructive thinking inventory was used to measure whether negative kinds of thinking, things like esoteric thinking, superstitious thinking, naive optimism, if those would decrease and more positive aspects of thought would increase. Better logic, better understanding of cause and effect, that sort of thing. And again, we found an enormous effect for the TM group in increase of constructive thinking. This was quite large. We also found on a subscale of it that problem solving and coping also increased. Okay, finally, we come to what really excites me, and that's the future analysis that's going to begin as soon as classes end. Finally, we're going to be taking a look at what's going on in the brain. My colleagues and I are quite excited about this. We are eagerly arguing with each other about what it is that's happening. And so we will be looking at the following EEG measures: error-related negativity, and also error-related positivity, which is the flip side of it. This seems to have to do with the ability of the brain to inhibit errors, but also, more importantly perhaps, to learn quickly from mistakes. We're also going to be looking at novel P300, which is a measure that correlates with hypervigilance. In the work we've done with veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, we found that they did have a heightened P300. They also had heightened hypervigilance, but the ones who were suffering the most also had a high level of dissociation on the dissociation scale. We'll also be looking at alpha power and alpha coherence, this measure of brain integration that Fred Travis has developed. It looks to be quite promising. It looks at the balancing of the brain front to back and left to right. We want to examine that. Something that my research team has pioneered is the use of eye tracking to look at threat response. And this actually gives us a very fine detail of analysis of how each individual is responding to threat. Pupil dilation to threat, attention and avoidance. How does a person deal with that? Arousal and threat recovery, is it rapid? Does it occur at all? And accuracy of visual attention. Let me show you an example of the kinds of measures that we're getting with eye tracking. This is a typical split screen image that we use to assess fixation. You see that on the image on the left, there are many eye fixations that are recorded as circles that are aqua. This is not surprising because this is a disturbing, unusual image. Compared to the right, that is to say, the one on the right is similar in terms of the position of the individual, but obviously the meaning is extremely different. So this is going to give us a great deal of information. Okay, the significance, resilience, and constructive thought developed much faster than we had expected. And it's not just resilience according to the dispositional resilience scale, but literally all of these results that we found and that have been found over and over again over the last 40 years for TM, that's resilience. Resilience is a decrease in negative emotions. It is an increase in positive traits and abilities. So we would say then that the results of the TM practice are essentially resilience. The TM effect is a resilience effect. And resilience is known to be the opposite of post-traumatic stress, which is why we're so very interested in it. Now, the last question I will leave you with, the one ultimately most exciting, I think, to neuroscientists is the brain, during the practice of transcendental meditation, optimizing itself? Possibly what occurs during transcendental meditation is that the conditions are set up very easily for the brain to take over and run its own maintenance script that allows it to literally return to normal and then move beyond that to a more optimal state. At any rate, we will continue this as a longitudinal study, and thank you very much.